Anytime I'm going from disorder to order, then I need ATP. And what did I need to join all the C's and H's and O's together? Yeah, I need electrons, because those electrons will be the bonds. All right, cool. So this was a chloroplast, and we had the sun, and there's a ray of sunshine. And so what were those green molecules called? Chlorophyll. And whenever the sun hit those chlorophyll molecules, then the electrons in those chlorophyll molecules were excited up in energy levels. And the thing that makes chlorophyll special is that when those electrons go up in energy levels, chlorophyll doesn't let them fall down right away. My dark shirt, my dark green shirt, if I go outside, it doesn't do photosynthesis, so I don't get full because I walked outside in my green shirt. The electrons go up in energy level in my shirt, and they fall back down and give off heat. But here, before they fall down, we pass those electrons off to that proton pump. And that proton pump, protons into this thing. What was this thing called again that started with a T? Yeah, thylakoid. Thylakoid. And if I have a bunch of protons in here, then they'll flow through the hollow ATP synthesis, will make ATP. And anytime I get any of these ingredients, where do I need to send them? Like once I get ATP and electrons and all that stuff, yeah, send them to Calvin. So I'll take that ATP. It actually just diffuses, but eventually it'll make it over there to the Calvin cycle. Great, I've got ATP. Okay, next step. If I want to recharge these, I kind of plug them again into the wall again, so to speak. I can recharge those electrons, and now they're all charged up right there. Now the electrons are charged up. They're holding a good amount of energy. We don't drop them, so they stay charged. So that part right there, you might put a little comment of electrons equal charged. I don't want to use the word charged. We'll say full of energy. Full energy. So that'll be important conceptually in a minute. And then we saw that there was somebody that could come and pick up these electrons to take to Calvin, and it had a similar name as the electron carriers over here. What was that one? Yeah, NADP plus. Yeah, you're exactly right. So NADP plus, we'll grab those electrons, become NADPH, and then we send those to Calvin. Got the ATP, got the electrons, we're 2/3 done. And probably the last thing that we might have mentioned was, I would say, the way that I remember, if it's months from now, that this is NAD and that is NAD, whereas this is NADP, is NADP is used in photosynthesis. Photosynthesis starts with a P, and NADP has the letter P in it. All right, cool. So right around in there somewhere is where we left off. Where do we get the C and the O from? Where do we get the C and the O? Yeah, carbon dioxide. So just out there in the air. So the CO2 out in the atmosphere, that's where I get the C and the O from. So if I can get some carbon dioxide, I send it to Calvin. Any of these ingredients that I can get, I send to Calvin. So CO2 is what I input there. So I've got 2/3 of a check mark. And the last thing I need to figure out is how to get some hydrogen or hydrogen ions. How can I get some hydrogen or hydrogen ions? I don't want to use these hydrogen ions, so I'll just keep using them. Or if I do use them, I'm going to have to replace them. So how can I get hydrogen? Yeah, water. Turns out, all around me, so inside of this chloroplast is water. Just like inside of all my cells, we always hear that we're 2/3 water or something. I don't know exactly how much we are, but we're mostly water. And so even in this cup right here, most of it is H2O, but not all of it. So I don't know what percentage. I'm sure it's over 99% of the water in that cup is H2O, but a small percent, probably less than 1%, is ionic. So it's like, it's not covalently bonded. It's OH minuses and H pluses. So water is not always covalent. It's, again, 99+% of the time, I'm sure, it's covalent. But a small amount of water is OH and H plus. So as long as there's water in here, I have access to H's. So there you go. Finished off my check mark. So I got C's and O's from carbon dioxide. I got H's from the surrounding water. I got electrons from that chlorophyll right there. I charged them up and sent them over here. And I got ATP by this process over here of ATP synthase and all that stuff. Okay, so far does this make sense? Okay, now, what I find interesting about this is how it relates to cellular respiration. So we'll come back. The last thing we'll talk about is rubin, so don't worry about that at the moment. That's just sort of like the starting chemical of the Calvin cycle, kind of like the starting chemical of Krebs. Here's acetyl-CoA, coenzyme A is vitamin A. If you don't need any vitamin A, you die because you can't do the Krebs cycle. So eat some carrots. Bless you. All right, so here's what I find interesting. Whenever I feed the Calvin cycle, I only feed it 3 carbon dioxides. So can I make full glucose? Can I make half a glucose? Yeah, so essentially I'm making a half a glucose. Now, they do have a name for this chemical. I wouldn't worry about it. It's got 2 names. One is G3P glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Another one is P-gal phosphoglyceraldehyde. But essentially what matters is that it's half a glucose. So I know this is not a hard question, but play along. When I spin the Calvin cycle once and make a half a glucose, and then I spin it again and make a second half glucose.
Nazi French, if you were please come to the office. Nazi French, if you are in the building, please come to the office. Thank you.
Why is everybody saying, Wait, what?
I don't know if she actually stayed, but that's what she was talking about.
Oh, okay. It just sounded more serious.
I don't know why she was doing all that.
Yeah, I was like, even the voice sounded a little bit, I was like, oh, no. Like, I almost felt like it was one of those, like, hey, that's, my brother's having problems, and, like, the sister has the medication. Or almost like it, I thought it was like one of those, like, it felt like a medical emergency or something. Anyway, so hopefully it's just somebody broke out, kind of like the monkey. So jailbreak. All right, so I get a half glucose, and I get a half glucose, and what am I going to build when I get 2 half glucoses? Yeah, a full glucose. All right, so you're like, okay, fine. Now, remind me really quick, I'm going to erase, I'll just move this down here a little bit. I'll erase that. So I'll put the CO2 right here. So kind of hold this thought for a second. And then if I'm looking at cellular respiration, can somebody give me one of the reactants in the cellular respiration, like the chemical equation? I've got 2 reactants. Give me one. Yeah, Caitlin. Yeah. So that makes sense to me because I got to breathe in oxygen. What was my other reactant over here? Yeah, glucose. C6, H12O6. And then one of my products? Yeah, carbon dioxide because I breathed that out. What else did I breathe out? Water. And then the whole point, I'm trying to make a whole bunch of ATP. So some 6s, 30 plus. If I'm looking at the photosynthesis equation, what was that? I kind of remember from biology 1, there was some sort of trick to the photosynthesis equation. Yeah. I basically get rid of the ATP, and then I just flip-flop it, and that's the photosynthesis equation. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write it again, even though, you know, if I'm writing in my notes, I might just say flip-flopped or something. Again, I don't include the ATP, but otherwise it's perfectly flip-flopped. And 6, 6, 6 again, so that's photosynthesis. So the reason that I write that up there is because the equations are the reverse of each other. Again, minus the ATP, they're the reverse of each other. But also, like, the machine is the reverse also. So if I start kind of looking at this, I'll run you through this once. I'll add on a little bit of detail and then run you through it again. But like right here, didn't I make glucose by joining 2 half glucoses? Well, right here, didn't I take a glucose and make it into 2 half glucoses? Slightly different pyruvate. Then this pyruvate, didn't I like send it into a cycle? This one, didn't these guys come from a cycle? Over here, didn't this cycle produce like electron carriers like NADHs and FADH2s? Isn't this guy receiving electron carriers like NADPH? Didn't the Krebs cycle, didn't it like kick out, didn't it like produce? Over here, aren't we taking in carbon dioxide into the cycle? Over here, it was probably the last thing that I wrote. I was like, hey, single ATP, like one ATP. Over here, aren't I injecting ATP? So isn't the Calvin cycle sort of the like put it all together cycle, and the Krebs cycle sort of like the rip it all apart, but it's the same pieces more or less? All right. From here, where did I get these electrons from this electron carrier? This electron carrier is going to go and power some proton pumps that then flow through ATP synthase to help me make ATP. Where did these electrons come from? Well, they came from these powered proton pumps that help me make ATP. All right, now, at the very end, this will be new, not over here, but it'll be new over here. Who was it that was the final electron carrier that like grabbed the electrons and took them away? It was oxygen. And when oxygen grabbed those electrons, what did oxygen then turn into? Water. Okay, so hold that thought for a second. What's wrong with this? Everything I say is right, but this should bring up a problem. You should be like, but Mr. What about this? So here's some chlorophyll molecules. That sunlight. Steal those electrons, power this pump, recharge them, send them over here. He grabs them. Those electrons end up in the bonds of glucose. Great, I made some glucose. Oh, I want to make more glucose. I'm going to go over to the same chlorophylls, steal some more electrons, power the pumps, recharge them. They end up in the bonds of glucose. Oh, I want more glucose. I'm going to go to the same chlorophylls, steal some more electrons. What's wrong with this picture? Yeah, I'm going to run out of electrons. I can't steal electrons from here forever, so I have to somehow like resupply some more electrons. I know we just said it, but didn't oxygen come and grab electrons, the spent ones? And then what did we just say that it became after it grabbed the electrons? Water. Do I have to water my plants to keep them alive? So what if I bring that in reverse? Wouldn't it be water dropping off electrons and becoming oxygen? So that's what happens right here. Water will drop off electrons and become oxygen. And that's oxygen that you and I breathe. So the reason that you have to water your plants is that's their source of electrons. Plants die if I don't water them because that is their source of electrons. You and I, our source of electrons is the food that we eat. So if we don't eat food, we die because we don't have a source of electrons. We have to water them to give them electrons. So it's literally the reverse. The equations are the reverse, and the machine, the way the machines run, are pretty much just in reverse. So again, over here, oxygen grabbed electrons and became H2O. Now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take those electrons and then drop them off here. It's kind of interesting, too. These electrons that oxygen just grabbed, do they have a whole lot of energy or very little energy? I grabbed them from here. Not much. Didn't they just spend all their energy? So when oxygen grabs those electrons and becomes water, those electrons have a whole lot of energy. No. So when I drop off those electrons, what's the very first thing that I need to do to them? Charge them with sunlight. That's why we charge them with sunlight. It's almost like this. Think of it this way. Pretend that this is like a power brick, and I have 100% power. I go over here, I drop it off, I power that pump, that pump, that pump, and this thing is at 0. Oxygen comes and takes those electrons, my power brick away, becomes water, and drops it off over here. Well, I just received the power brick, but it's at 0%. So my charger, I need to recharge it, so I zap it with sunlight. So I drop off electrons, and the first thing I need to do is charge them up. So I charge them up, send them over here, use some or all the energy, I don't know, to power pumps, and to power this pump, charge them again. Now, these electrons are energized. These electrons have all their energy. They're at high energy levels. These electrons have a bunch of energy. They're at high energy levels. That's the glucose you and I eat. So now when I steal these electrons to power these pumps, don't those electrons have a lot of energy? So I'll go with this analogy again. Pretend that this represents my electrons. And the electrons are at 100% energy. A third, a third, a third. Oxygen's going to grab 0 energy. It becomes water. And I come over here, drop them off. They're at 0% energy. I become oxygen. To go grab more. The sunlight hits them. They go all the way up to 100%. They drop, I don't know, part way. I zap them again. Now these electrons are full of energy, full of energy, full of energy, full of energy. You and I eat the glucose. When I steal those electrons, they're full of energy. So the reason that you and I exist is because of that step right there. I charged the electrons here, but I never used the energy. So that energy is in glucose, and you and I can steal those electrons that are full of energy. If these electrons right here had 0 energy in them, that'd be like me stealing electrons that have like 0 energy in them. So that step right there is why our food, why the electrons in our food have energy. We charge them up and didn't use it. So you and I can use it to power us. It's kind of cool. The water cycle, the oxygen cycle, and the carbon cycle all together. All right, this kind of makes sense. Again, I'm not saying have you got it all like locked down in memory, but like if you were to go back and watch the video or whatever, you're like, okay, I can logically, each step is logical. I kind of forgot the third step, but like if I watch it again, like it makes sense. Okay, there's one last thing that's important that they can trip you up with, and that is the way that we talk about these reactions. So make sure you write this like somewhere. If you have your green page and you got the photosynthesis side, you might even like divide it this way. So all the reactions on the thylakoids, they sometimes just say reactions on the thylakoids, but they also call all of these reactions over here, all this thylakoid stuff, they call those light dependent. Light dependent. It's very logical, of course. I have to have light to run those reactions. Those are the light-dependent reactions. So light-dependent reactions are all the crap happening on thylakoids. Those photosystems, the proton pump, the little docking station thing, I make some NADPH, I make some ATP, that's all called light-dependent. So sometimes they call this the Calvin cycle. Sometimes they call it something else. So if this is light-dependent, this is light-independent. The Calvin cycle can happen when it's light out, but it doesn't have to. So the Calvin cycle is also called light independent. If I'm writing for a professor and I call it the Calvin cycle, that's right. If I call it the light independent reactions, that's right. But the reason I tell you both is they usually stick with one. So this year on the multiple choice, they might decide to call it the Calvin cycle. Or they might decide to call it light independent. And as long as you can recognize them both, you're good to go. I'd hate for you to miss questions because you know all this stuff about the Calvin cycle, but they phrased it as what is light independent. Okay? As you're packing up, this is not on the test, but just so you can appreciate how good you have it, this is one version of photosynthesis. There are two others. In AP Bio, you used to have to know the two others. So in AP Bio, the test used to be cellular respiration, C3 photosynthesis, C4 photosynthesis, and CAM photosynthesis. You have to know two of the four. As far as why would that matter at all, plants down here in like the Texas area, they usually do C4 photosynthesis. Plants up north do a different version. They do C3. That's why plants from Texas will always die if you plant them in Wisconsin. Plants from Wisconsin will always die if you try to plant them down here. So a palm tree in Wisconsin is going to die. Why? Well, up there, you need to do this version of photosynthesis to be super efficient. It's almost like having solar panels on your house. If you lived in Alaska when you have like 3 months with no sunlight, like that's not very efficient. But in Texas, it might work. So yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, for sure.